Welcome to the inaugural podcast of Making Nice with Naughty. I'm Dr. Tom Murray.
I am Dr. Frances Robbins.
We are so delighted to have you join us as we embark on this new adventure to showcase how temperament, particularly the over-controlled temperament, interferes or impacts your sexual development, desire, and personal attraction. So as we get on our way, I'd like Dr. Frances, go ahead and share your background and why you're here as our co-host.
Well, thank you, Tom, or Dr. Tom. I recently became a doctor, so I'm Dr. Frances, but I'm a doctor of business administration. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, was trained in the military, and served 10 years as a U.S. Air Force mental health specialist, or in a mental health clinician. I met you years ago, and we became internet buddies. We've gone through, lots of things together, and certainly COVID together, and traveled and seen each other outside of work, and close with your family, and you are with my family. So I'm glad that we're able to do this together. I am excited about being here today because I'm concerned about the message that people hear about sexual health from as I'm getting older. That's part of it. And then patients that I have that come through my clinic from time to time that are concerned about sexual health and medications that they take. And being a psychiatric nurse practitioner, certainly I prescribe medications. I also do psychotherapy. But your book has really caused me to kind of take a pause. And I'm so excited to be able to sit down with you in these moments and really dive into the book. And particularly, I want to kind of start as if we were reading the book together. And I encourage people that are listening to have that book. Certainly it's available in Amazon and whatnot, but have it. And I think you even have an audio of the book too, don't you?
That's right. Available on Audible and Spotify and many other outlets.
Great. Okay. Well, so with that, do you feel like you're in a place, Tom, where you could just give an overview of what Making Nice Naughty is about and kind of explain maybe how you came up with the name and what was the inspiration behind writing the book?
Yeah, so Making Nice with Naughty was a title that I had come up with quite some time ago. Sometimes we do, right? We come up with titles before we have the book. And the book had changed over a number of years to eventually culminate to reflect this awareness that a lot of the clients that I have come with sexual and interpersonal problems that boil down to what is called the over-controlled temperament. And a lot of the show will be reflecting on how this stable way of being in the world, the over-controlled temperament, has its own pros and cons, and showcasing that. So, initially in the September of 2020, at the height of the global pandemic, I was working with a couple, and it was my first time with them. And I had this light bulb moment that I bet I could predict the nature of this couple's sex life by asking just one question. Are you a be careful parent? Be careful, be careful, be careful. You might hurt yourself. Be careful. Or are you a have fun parent? Have fun, take the risk. If you hurt yourself, we can put you back together kind of style. And what emerged was that a lot of the couples who have these sexual issues are often the be careful types.
Oh,
right? The be careful types. And we call that the over-controlled temperament. And one of the things that is common among people with the over-controlled temperament is that they were told from an early age that being naughty was bad. taking risk was bad,
Mhm.
having
Mhm.
mystery was bad,
Mhm.
that only pursuing certainty, comfort, familiarity was the right way to go. And so they made enemies out of being naughty, and my the book's objective is to help people to make nice with, or to become friends with, naughty as a means to have a much more fulfilling and meaningful sex life.
That's interesting. Do you know if you see that more, the over controlled in a family where maybe they're more like the family, there's a stay-at-home adult that's there with them, or if they're in a daycare setting? I kind of have this vision like a daycare setting, the kids would just be kind of on their own, and maybe they would be more willing to take the risk. I don't know. Have you seen any correlation with that?
Well, make sure I'm following you. You're asking, is the psychology of someone who is likely to be a stay-at-home parent, are they more likely to be over controlled?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking? Versus someone who is
A
uh, uh
latchkey kid or a daycare.
yeah, in daycare. That's a question I hadn't considered. What's coming up for you? I'd be curious.
Well, I I was raised as a latchkey kid.
Yeah.
My mom was very proud of the fact that she was working and I grew up in a time when most moms were at home.
Mm.
And it was a traditional family. Most moms were home, dad was off earning the money. And my father was in the military. And so I remember many times he was just completely out of the picture, and my mom would work, and I was the kid with literally with a key that was on a string that I wore around my neck.
Uh-huh.
And really I didn't really have a lot of boundaries. In fact, I probably pushed a lot of boundaries.
Mm.
So, and I think about myself as a parent. So now I have two children. They're adult people now. They're gone off and doing great things in their life. But growing up, I was really more concerned about, this is going to sound so bad, Tom. This is so bad. But I do have permission from my kids. I was like, I'm going to be on this podcast. So I was more concerned about the cost of the healthcare.
Mm.
So they have memories of me saying things like, "We haven't met our deductible yet. You need to get out of that tree."
Right, right, right.
Or and then there was a period of time where I was a regular or RN, a registered nurse, and I worked in an emergency room in a rural community,
Yeah.
and people would come in all the time with their kids just banged up, trampoline accidents, broken clavicles, or the four-wheelers, and they ride into the barbed wire. I mean, just horrible things that can happen. And my son would tell me, I don't get to do nothing because my mom works in the ER.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
really, it was really about the deductible. I was
Right.
more concerned about, oh my gosh, we haven't met our deductible.
Mhm,
Get back
mhm.
here, you know.
Yeah.
I
Well, not
I
that it's interesting you say that. I do find that anybody who goes to graduate school, and we know that you have a number of graduate degrees,
Yes.
that in order to progress through graduate school, it does require a certain level of an over controlled temperament, right? So
Yeah.
kind of like that over control, for our listeners, is that it's really a continuum. The large continuum is under controlled, and then its opposite is over controlled. And some people can be mildly over controlled, and then others can be severely over controlled to the point that it is maladaptive. And at the very far end of that continuum, we see things like anorexia, obsessive compulsive personality disorder,
Mm.
autism, schizoid personality, paranoid personality. So at the very far end, we see kind of the extreme maladaptive forms, but most people who are over controlled certainly aren't at that extreme. One of the characteristics, though, that is common among a lot of over-controlled people is that sensitivity to finances,
Mhm.
right? So,
Mhm.
over-controlled people are often hoarders of things. Some people hoard ideas, such as reading self-help books, listening to podcasts. They do a lot of the hoarding of ideas. Some will hoard time, such as I got to save time. That's a
Sure.
waste of time. And
Sure.
then others will hoard money, right? Fearing that there's going to be some catastrophe in the future that they have to plan for. So while your example isn't quite like hoarding money, it is a common theme
Mhm.
among over-controlled people.
Well, I think that the in our livelihood, so I see the adults that need help. You see primarily couples as a
Mhm,
sex therapist.
mhm,
When they come to you and they have this over controlling personality, is it where they are saying, um, in order for us to have any kind of intimate relationship, we have to meet certain criteria? Or is it, I can't have this intimate relationship with you right now because I have to take care of this problem? Is that how it manifests? Is that how it shows up in your sessions with people?
It certainly can. Some people will have the rule, I can't have sex until Saturday at 1 o'clock, right?
Mm,
So there's this kind of rigidity
mhm,
around when it can happen. Even if they're
mhm,
actually horny, they may be horny on a Thursday night, but their
mhm,
thought is, oh, I'm not going to have sex then. I know it's going to happen on Saturday, and I can do other things
mm,
tonight being
mm,
Thursday and put it off,
mm.
even though if they would have sex on Thursday night, they would enjoy it a lot more, right?
Wow. Wow.
Other people, though, will have other rules like, there's dishes in the sink. I can't have sex until the dishes are clean, or if they hear noise outside, if it's the kids or
Mhm,
your dog,
mhm.
it's so,
It is hard, Tom, to have sex when right now we live, my husband,
yeah,
his sweet mommy lives with us,
yeah.
and I love her very much, but it definitely has caused me to take a pause, like, "She's over there. She's in another room."
Do you think she doesn't think that her adult son and daughter-in-law don't have sex?
I told her one day that, we do upstairs things downstairs, and so she'll say that from time to time. "Are y'all gonna do some upstairs things upstairs?" She's from Mississippi.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's amazing though how people can get really into their heads.
Yeah.
And because
Yeah.
one of the things that over-controlled people absolutely are hungry for is certainty. And so sometimes
Mhm.
that can be certainty that they're not going to embarrass someone, or certainty that they're
Mhm.
not going to embarrass themselves.
Mm.
That kind of
Sure.
drive for certainty. And they don't, over control people, we don't like to feel vulnerable in the midst of the uncertainty,
Mhm.
right?
Ooh, Tom, you said "we."
Oh yes, I'm definitely over controlled. I remember I've shared this story. I was at a sex therapy conference, and as does happen when sex therapists get together, that there's often sex that occurs. And I was invited to go back to a hotel room, and the person and I started making out, and she asked, "Do you want to have sex out on the balcony?" This is in San Juan, in Puerto Rico, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'm game." And then she opened up the curtains to the balcony, and the balcony was lit like the 4th of July.
Oh my.
No, there is no sex going to be
Oh,
happening out on the balcony. But if we were on the other side of the hotel where the balcony was totally pitch black, I would have certainly have entertained the idea, right? So there's that concern, that anxiety, where some people would have been totally like, "Oh, that's so hot and sexy. Let's put on a show for people." Over-controlled people such as myself would absolutely are just terrified by that idea.
Oh my. I had no idea that there was so much extracurricular activity happening at the sex therapist conference. I don't usually go. I have never been to a sex therapist conference. I'll just say that. I've been to lots of nursing conferences and psychopharmacology conferences. Yeah, we never got together and had sex.
Well, there's always
Not that it couldn't happen.
all I can picture at your conference is the slapping of the latex gloves, when you're getting. Hello there, dear readers. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the release of the Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, narrated by yours truly. As the author, I've poured my heart and soul in telling your story, especially how your psychological temperament shows up in the bedroom and how it gets in the way of intimacy. With every sentence, every emotion, I'm right there with you, guiding you through getting more meaning and fulfillment in your sexual and intimate relationships. The wait is over. You can now download the audiobook on Audible or from my website, drtommurray.com, and immerse yourself in where you reclaim the playfulness of your sexuality. My voice is your compass as you navigate through every titillating moment, gaining powerful insights from psychology. Claim your aha moment. Click on the link and join me on this unforgettable journey toward making nice with Nadia. Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, available on Audible. Download now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. No, Tom, none of that happens.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, I was also kind of, when I was thinking about this and I was reading in your book about the over-controlled person, just as a way to connect with folks. And I love being able to take something out in part of our daily life and not just our own experiences, but something that we can all relate to and look at those different personalities to see where the over-controlled person is. And I'm curious about maybe like some Netflix movies or Hollywood actors or people that not personally know, or maybe you do, I don't know, but the characters that we know that we've watched years and years, how maybe they have some of those characteristics that might help some of our listeners to really see it in action, maybe to the extreme. But I wrote down Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. Now, he already has a lot of stuff going on. Would you say that he has got that over-controlled personality?
For sure. And if I remember right, he does acknowledge being on the autism spectrum. Right. And as I mentioned earlier, that some people consider it a disorder of over control. Right. That there can be a degree of psychological rigidity, inflexibility, depending on the level of that one's autism presents.
Yeah. I wondered, and then you remember the character Raymond from Rain Man?
Oh yeah, that's another autism, right? Right.
Again, the over-controlled. I'm watching right now. I've been watching Succession, and then the writer's strike happened.
That's right.
I don't know if you have gotten into that show. That's very good. There's lots of interesting characters on that.
Well,
and then
if we look at kind of what are the common, we'll keep in mind that the OC temperament is like all temperaments, neither good nor bad. I want to really underscore that. It's neither good or bad. In fact, in our society, we tend to privilege a lot of these over-controlled qualities. So some of them would be the ability to delay gratification, right? That's a core quality of over-controlled people, that they're not impulsively grabbing at things, but they can delay gratification. They have a strong desire to be correct, precise. They want to exceed expectations. They want to perform well. They have a strong duty, a sense of duty, obligation, self-sacrifice. So when I think of a lot of my former military clients,
Mhm.
the people who are over controlled tend to do very well in the
Mhm.
military. They
Mhm.
know exactly what they need to do. Everything's quite procedural. They follow orders. It's in
Correct.
fact, the over controlled temperament is very rule following. They tend to value following rules, as I mentioned, but also fairness, right? So that's a core part, and to be detailed focused, uh, pattern recognition, right? So when we look at all of those qualities, we can see how
Mhm.
they correlate with good pro-social attributes
Until they don't.
until they don't. That's right. Yeah.
What do you think about Elon Musk?
Oh yeah. Yes, he has a very strong belief about how the world should be, must be, and has to be, and
Mhm.
that when the world doesn't comport to how he thinks it should or must or has to be, he can have what we call emotional leakage. He can attack back in pretty strong ways.
Yes. Yes. So when you think about, I understand what you're saying about the over controlled is not a good or a bad, right? It's
That's
just
right.
it is what it is. But there has to be, in my mind, there has to be some sort of downside to that. I think about what they miss out on,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
They don't have that spontaneity, if I'm understanding correctly. They don't necessarily find joy in their daily life. Maybe they plan joy.
Right. They think that the goal, achieving the goal, will be the source of their joy. I just
Mhm.
had a client today, a new client. The husband talked about how he's very goal oriented, and he's just beginning to recognize, as he's entering his 40s, that
Mhm.
it's never ending. He achieves the goal, and then it's immediately, I want the next goal, the next goal,
Yeah.
the next goal,
Yeah.
and that can be quite alienating, particularly if you're in a relationship and your partner's been hoping and waiting for your time and attention, only to realize that that they're having to compete with the pursuit of the next goal.
I understand. I was that person,
Yeah,
easily that person, where I was so driven to what was out there. I was so driven to meet that goal,
yeah.
whatever it would be, that I lost sight of what was happening around me.
Mm. Hmm.
And then when I would reach the goal, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Right,
It
right.
wasn't nearly as exciting as I thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so then it's like, okay, now I got to go find another goal. And so it was this constant pursuit of seeking more and wanting more or just going after more.
Right.
And and it I was very driven, but at the risk of those relationships around me, for sure, at the risk.
Now, when you think about your childhood,
Mhm.
uh, and you were and knowing what you know about the over controlled temperament versus the under control, do you have a sense about how your parents fall on that broader continuum?
Yes. So my father was career Army, very over controlled,
Yes.
very over controlled. My mother was the same, over controlled. I was not a planned child. My brother is 10 years older than I am.
Mm,
And so I was brought up more as like an accessory that kind of comes with the house.
mm,
And um, and I was definitely the joker of the family. Always, my brother is very growing up. He was always very straight laced. Did exactly, at least from my perspective, right? Did exactly what my parents said. Where I would purposely go the opposite of what my parents said,
mm,
and and constantly was doing different things that the other kids in the neighborhood necessarily weren't doing. And I didn't sit back and think, oh, I want more attention from my parents, so I'm going to go off and do these things. I think it was just a matter of no boundaries and just this imagination and allowed to do whatever. And so you just go off and do whatever. Tom, I can remember it was in the early 70s. And my father was stationed. He was in Vietnam. And he was military CID, so he investigated he was kind of like a detective for the Army. And he was in Vietnam. I think I was third grade, so however old that is. We lived in a little community there, this was in Miami, Florida. And we were there because my mother's mom was living there, so we wanted to be close to grandma. Well, I told everybody in the neighborhood that my dad was dead.
Oh.
I just told everybody that my dad was dead.
Mm.
And they all believed me. Now, my mother worked all the time, and she was a bookkeeper, accountant, and she worked for a company, and she just worked all the time. She was rarely home. And so I would get myself ready for school, go off to school, walk to the elementary school was like a block away. And then after school, I would kind of hang out with my friends in their house and then eventually make it back over to my house about the time that my mom came home. So nobody in the neighborhood really knew her. And so I was just going around telling everybody that my dad was dead and that he died in Vietnam. Now, why did I do that? I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But when he came home, that was very hard to explain.
It's a miracle.
It was very hard to explain.
Yeah.
And I have no idea whatever came of that. And then I would do things like the neighbors across the street. This was, the early 70s. The houses were unlocked. I would go into people's houses. They're not home. And I would clean their house. How weird is that? Who does that?
Yeah.
But I was always in the midst of somebody else's something. And I don't think honestly it was, oh, that kid needs, she's begging for attention or whatever. I think it was just no boundaries. And so, but my parents, when they did get wind of anything I did, here's another example. Across the street was a sweet little Baptist family, and we were raised in the Church of Christ. And in the Church of Christ, you have communion every Sunday. So, like most kids, you play house and you play school. Well, we would play church.
Oh.
And my parents always kept a wet bar. And I had some little shot glasses. Again, fourth grade, something like that. And my little friend, Alicia, from across the street would come over and we would play church. And I would pour the
Holy Spirits
into the shot glass, and we would have communion.
Yeah.
Well, Alicia went and told her mom, and I got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So it was things like that. That's when my parents would be like, "What are you doing? We're just playing church."
I think that's a really great example of how, when you've grown up in family with family members who are dare I say, excessively over-controlled, it can make one seem as if they are under-controlled, but when they are just, in fact, less over-controlled, right? So if we think about it as 0 to 100 and someone's in that 80 range, and you're in that 10, 15, 20 range, from that 80 range person, they can look and think, oh my gosh, you're so impulsive, you're so erratic, you're so right. When, for example, putters, people who self-injure,
Are you
Historically,
saying cutters or cutters?
cutters.
Okay.
Yeah, cutters.
I'm like golfers
Yeah.
with a little stick?
Yeah. And so some people will look at cutters, people who self-injure and say, oh, that's the perfect example of under controlled, right? It seems impulsive. But when you interview people who are cutters, they often say, I've been thinking all day about where I'm going to do this, where on my body I'm going to do this, how I'm going to take care of my lacerations. So there's a lot more planning
A
that
lot of
goes into
planning.
it, right? And so
Mhm.
that is a core indication that someone is in fact not under controlled, but are over controlled because of the amount of time and attention that they're putting into the preparation. And
Right.
so where I was going with this, when you were thinking about whose house you were going to go in, were you just walking down the street and be like, I'm going to just walk into that house right there?
No, I knew who they were,
Yeah, yeah.
and I knew that they weren't home.
And you knew that they would be okay, presumably, that you did this.
Mhm.
Right, right, right.
So odd. So odd. Who does that? That's so odd.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah. We
And I
do
was
crazy
never
stuff.
caught. I was never caught. So now if they're out there listening, it was me.
That was before the ring bell.
That's right.
Francis,
Man,
what are you doing on the porch?
I know. I know. I know. Man. There's a lot of that is it's definitely a different world now. You
Oh, for
certainly
sure.
can't get away with the things we used to,
Yeah, for
for
sure.
sure.
So you mentioned kind of I talked about what are the OC characteristics and the virtues, but there are these 4 core deficits
Okay.
of the OC person that can really show up. And one of the first one is what's called low receptivity to openness. And essentially what that means is over controlled people tend to avoid the novel, the unexpected, right? They tend to resist critical feedback. And at some point in the show, we can talk about the ways in which they do that. They, as I mentioned earlier, avoid uncertainty or unplanned risks. I give the example of the stereotypical over-controlled person spends weeks studying Consumer Report before they buy that vacuum cleaner. So
That would be my husband.
because they don't want to feel like they're going to regret something in the future. So they're trying to take care of the future self, who's all tied up in anguish and regret. They're trying to care for that future self by making a very planful decision, calculated decision in the present. They tend to be suspicious, right? Hyper vigilant to potential threat. I often say as a therapist, I'm very nervous that I'll go to a training and the trainer somehow wants me to drink the Kool-Aid, right?
You
That
have
they're
to expand on that.
Yeah, a lot of our colleagues in the profession promote these theories and approaches that, and they make arguments like it's the best treatment for X, Y, or Z, or it's better
Correct.
than treatment X, Y, or Z. And I know empirically that all psychotherapies tend to be equally effective. It's called the dodo bird verdict. There's no therapy that's more effective than any other therapy. And so when I go to these trainings, and that's the approach that people take, and I see the other clinicians in the auditorium shaking their head with enthusiasm, I just get really nervous. Right? So I lean towards being very critical and discerning, if you will, about what's going on, because I just so am nervous about drinking the Kool-Aid. And so that low receptivity to openness is the first core deficit.
So low receptivity to openness
A low receptivity and openness. So it's
and
low.
openness.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So it's just this shying away from the new and the novel.
So not somebody that you would want to have a surprise birthday party for.
That's right. In fact, a story I talk about in the book is a a a uh, a couple where the to-be bride wanted to know ahead of time when the proposal was going to happen, so because she didn't like surprises, right?
Oh
And
my.
yeah, and so
Mhm.
you can imagine again, life is inherent. Life is an inherent series of uncertainties,
Correct.
right?
That's what makes it fun and
That's
exciting and
that's
worth
exactly right.
living.
Yes, yeah, but people spend a lot of time to try to get rid of uncertainty, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
they develop mechanisms that I call pseudo certainty. So they give themselves the illusion they have certainty,
Mhm.
when in fact life is an inherent series of uncertainties.
You know what? Where I see that come out so much is when I go and visit folks that are incarcerated, seeing how they're
Mm,
very tied. And then many years ago, I was a nursing home administrator, and we would have residents that were, for lack of a better word, institutionalized. And
mhm,
so they found comfort in routine.
yeah,
And when we ever deviated from that routine, whether it was, hey, we're having meatloaf on Monday, we always have meatloaf on Monday. Why are we having meatloaf on Tuesday? Can cause a lot of anxiety and certainly cause them to just have what we will later learn and talk about, an emotional leakage,
yeah, yes,
right? But
yeah.
I see it so much in folks that are institutionalized.
Well, I think that there's a well, that's a form of what's called a fixed mindset,
Mhm,
right? This rigidity around things have to go a certain
mhm,
way, and when it doesn't, they some people can feel personally attacked, right? That if there's a change in routine. At the same time,
mhm,
we also know that finding a means to accommodate the unexpected leads to it can um, activate a learning mindset. And when people are not stimulated in those ways,
mhm,
right, they atrophy over time because they're not
mhm,
experiencing adversity. And what we know, of course, and I talk about that in the chapter on trauma, that if how we approach adversity is uh, uh, hugely important, particularly as it relates to that flexible mindset. So you
mhm,
have the rigid mindset, the fatalistic mindset. Again, things
mhm.
that we'll talk about in some future episode that come into play.
It's interesting. Well, let's do a little brief recap of what we've learned today. And then I want to give everybody a quick little preview of what they can expect in our next little episode.
Yes, we talked about making nice with naughty and how the personality construct of the over-controlled temperament impacts people's experience of sex and relationships in their lives. We covered the kind of core characteristics of the OC temperament, such as delayed gratification, the desire to be correct, the valuing of duty, obligation, fairness, and rules. And we covered just one of the core deficits, which is low receptivity and openness. And future episodes will spend time talking about the other three.
Great, great. And so we're going to have our next episode, and we're going to be talking about emotional leakage, which I have to tell you, when I first heard that, I think it's very graphic, especially if you're a nurse and you think of leakage. Leakage is never a good word.
Do you remember Olean? Do you remember that oil, Olean? They made chips of it in the 90s, and one of the well, like Lay's
Uh-huh.
would fry their chips in Olean because the molecules were so large that they weren't
Oh,
absorbed. But one of the One of the side effects of eating too much olein was anal leakage.
Oh, yes, yes. So that happens with sorbitol. So
Oh, yeah.
they have those fat-free chips and candies, diabetic candies. If you see sorbitol, you got to know you're going to have disaster pants. But emotional leakage, I think that is, we can only, kind of just envision what that would look like. We've probably all have been witness to emotional leakage. And I just want to invite folks to come back and listen to us next time when we meet, and we'll be talking about emotional leakage.
Bye-bye.
Bye.